You're now live.
We are live, so I'm going to call Senate Finance back into session. And we're going to go back to H360. This is the Community Broadband Deployment Bill. And we first have Dr. Michelle Guité from VTEL. Mr. Guité, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And Gordon, could you please lead off for us?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the committee's time this afternoon. My name is Gordon Matthews. I'm Vice President of Legal and Regulatory Affairs for Vermont Telephone Company and VTEL Wireless. Michelle Guité, as you know, is here with us, and we also have VTEL Chief Technology Officer Ariana Robinson. We wanted to offer some thoughts on how we think VTEL can provide utility and help address some of the state's immediate broadband and connectivity objectives. And Michelle is going to get into some detail there. If it's okay with the committee, I'll take a few minutes off the top and just give some background information on the companies and some of the recent history.
Okay, that's fine. Floor is yours.
And see if I can, we provided a document to the committee, which I believe is on the website, but it was delivered just today. So I don't know if folks have had the chance to review it. So if I can just
Probably not.
bring
I
that
think-
up. Let's see. Just a moment.
Nope, we're not getting it.
Yeah, we're not seeing it, Gordon.
Just a moment.
If we have it, it might take a minute, but I think Faith can put it up.
Is that sharing now?
Nope.
Nope.
Gordon,
Okay.
let me find it and I'll put it up.
Gordon, you were sharing something. It was just your internet window.
Easiest thing to do is open the application. There you go.
We've got it.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go. So we'll just start with a little background on VTEL. VTEL is a small family-owned telephone company based in Springfield. It provides landline service to 14 Southern Vermont exchanges. VTEL is one of Vermont's rural local incumbents that you've heard from recently. That's in the category with Waitsfield, Champlain, and Franklin Telephone. VTEL's provided service over the same network for over 100 years, or the network's been in place for over 100 years. Most kind of substantial upgrade was in 2010. VTEL was a recipient of a $117 million award through the USDA's Rural Utilities Service. That was a 70% grant and 30% loan award. That was $82 million for an active fiber to the home project and $35 million to deploy a 4G LTE wireless project to certain underserved areas of the state. So that project was carried out primarily between 2011 and 2017. VTEL upgraded its traditional copper network to an active fiber to the home network. And over that fiber network, it provides high definition voice, symmetrical gigabit broadband service, and video service. So based on most recent state data from December 2020, Vermont Telephone Company is the primary internet service provider for 4% of all Vermont internet subscribers. So VTEL's active fiber to the home network has received national recognition. Recently, it was written up in PC Magazine with several several of VTEL's communities listed among the best work from home communities in the country based on broadband speeds and affordability. Just scroll down. This is the bit poor resolution, but this is the VTEL service territory where it provides fiber to the home service. So turning to VTEL Wireless, VTEL Wireless provides fixed wireless broadband to homes and businesses throughout the state. Again, between 2011 and 2017, VTEL Wireless built out a new network throughout Vermont to serve certain underserved areas using the $35 million award from RUS. VTEL also invested to deploy an additional 22 locations on top of the RUS funded locations to make the network a statewide network. VTEL Wireless is the primary internet service provider for 3% of all Vermont internet subscribers, again, based on the state's December 2020 data. So VTEL Wireless, in addition to fixed wireless service, provides a mobile voice over LTE, a voice service, and mobile high-speed data service. It provides wireless connectivity statewide for GMP smart grid network. It also provides roaming service for AT&T and T-Mobile and Sprint. They've of course merged, but they're still somewhat distinct for roaming purposes.
Madam Chair,
Senator McDonald.
is this a different company and enterprise from the Vermont Telephone Company that you were talking about earlier?
Sure. Yes, it is. VTEL Wireless is a sister company technically to Vermont Telephone Company.
I don't know what a sister company is. Could you explain that?
It's when companies have the same parent company, they can commonly be referred to as a sister company to each other.
Okay,
So
so
it's a distinct
who's the
company.
parent company of the first company you were sharing with us, Vermont Telephone Company?
Vermont National Telephone Company is the parent company to VTEL Wireless and to Vermont Telephone Company.
Well, the first one was referred to as a small family-owned company. Please try and dispel some of the confusion that I have and perhaps others have.
Well, I think it is a small family-owned company. I'm not sure what the confusion is. There's Vermont Telephone Company is an ILEC telephone company. VTEL Wireless is a distinct entity. It's a distinct company. Then they share the same parent company.
So the parent company owns three companies that you're sharing with us.
The parent company owns both VTEL Wireless and Vermont Telephone Company. Correct.
Okay.
So how can, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
how can the daughter of the parent company be a small family-owned company if it's owned by someone else?
Sure, you may want to weigh in here, but the
Gordon,
ownership entity is the
Gordon,
same.
let me help. The answer is really, really easy, Senator. So Vermont National is family owned. And so its subsidiaries, we also consider to be family owned. And it's owned by the Gite Brothers and Sisters Trust. It's managed by my two daughters. So it's also woman controlled.
Okay. Senator, does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, so we'll take the adjectives under advisement. Now we understand what the ownership is. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I think you can continue.
Okay. So VTEL Wireless, let's see. since its initial deployment, has continued to improve wireless coverage and wireless speed. So most notably in the last couple of years, since last year, VTEL has deployed 8 sites utilizing its what's called BRS spectrum. So that's a higher frequency spectrum that allows for greater throughput speeds to the end user. And we have deployed that currently on 8 sites throughout the state, and end users can see speeds of up to 200 to 300 megabits per second in optimal conditions there. Scrolling down, this is just a snapshot of the current distribution of VTEL wireless customers throughout the state, just to give you a high level view of how broadly the service is available and being utilized. I think you've heard some testimony recently that wireless service can't work in Vermont, or VTEL Wireless has no customers, or things of that nature. So this gives you a sense of where the service is actually being utilized throughout the state. So a couple high-level thoughts on current broadband goals and funding and current legislation, and then I'll kick it over to Michelle for some more detailed thoughts. So in general, VTEL is a strong supporter of fiber to the home service. We obviously have deployed it successfully in our service area, and think that's the optimal long-term service for the state to be looking to deploy. But we support the other rural incumbents who you've heard from. We don't think they should be excluded, or even that wireless should be excluded, as a near-term solution.
May I ask a question at this point?
Yes, Senator Brock.
It's regarding VTEL Wireless and the speeds up and down that you are getting currently for your customers who are on VTEL Wireless. What's your maximum speed?
All right, and what's the current non-BRS speeds? The maximum speeds we're seeing are probably between 70 and 80 megabits per second. On the 8 sites that we've got BRS deployed, their maximum speeds are between 200 and 300 megabits per second. I wouldn't say that's typical, but that's the high end that we're seeing.
Is that up and down, or is that down only?
That would be,
That's down. Yeah.
yeah, that would be the down direction. For upstream, we would typically see, upwards 50 to 75 megabits per second on the new BRS radios. For the kind of older or previous generation of frequencies that we've deployed, it's not unusual to see upwards of 25, 30 megabits per second.
Now, as you look at the state's goals that are in statute of 100 down and 100 up, how would your technology provide a pathway to that, other than your fiber to the premises installations?
I know Michelle will touch on some of this in his presentation, but in general, wireless is sort of a number of different frequencies and technologies. The goal is to get closer to the end user, reuse that spectrum over and over again using MIMO technologies, using other bands. So VTEL, and I know Gordon can speak to this, has purchased additional spectrum in other bands in order to increase that depth and to be able to deliver higher speeds to customers. A lot of the goal in wireless is picking the right frequency, picking the right technology to service, the given need. For someone who needs very high bandwidth, you're looking at higher frequencies, you're looking at being closer to those people. For people who just need broad coverage, a smaller amount of spectrum in a lower frequency is kind of the solution. So it depends on where you are in the state and which need you're trying to satisfy, but essentially more spectrum, more reuse of that spectrum by getting closer to that customer.
But Ariane, may I ask you a question?
Please.
If Senator Brock is partly asking, how soon will it be where most of the wireless carriers worldwide can easily offer 100 up, 100 down? How would that be answered? I know you might say they don't want 100 up, 100 down. They'd rather have 180 down and say 20 up or whatever. But let's say theoretically, how long is it before Verizon or China Mobile or everyone else can offer 100 up, 100 down with wireless around the world?
Yeah, so just to key in on one of those points you brought up, asymmetric service is certainly something we see in broadband all over our network anyway. And I'll move on in just a moment, but I know on our wireless, across the board, or even on our fiber to the home network, we often see the download speeds people are requesting. If somebody was downloading at 100 megabits per second, their upload ratio would be about 10% of that, 11% of that. So the demand for symmetrical, we just haven't seen it in the real world. That aside, other carriers, Verizon, T-Mobile, or just any carrier out there today is actually offering, services that you'll get several hundred megabits per second up and down. A number of them are leaning into 5G services. A number of them are leaning into MIMO, which is a category of that, and carrier aggregation, additional spectrum. So it is entirely possible. I think as we've often seen, that happens in the cities, that happens in the downtown areas first, and then spreads outward towards the rural areas. So I know probably not many of us have traveled to, downtown areas recently, big cities, but it certainly is a large amount of capacity in those areas today coming over wireless.
But Senator Brock, we're just about to go in a presentation we're excited about where we're saying 100 up, 100 down might be, in our opinion, the wrong number to be using. And we hope you'll be intrigued by that, but we're eager to go ahead and make our comments at your convenience.
Okay, thank you.
So Gordon, am I on?
Yep.
Okay, so Gordon, if you could put on the screen those financial tables, and my friends, I'm sorry to say that when you print these things, you need to be have very sharp eyes, but
Oh, yeah.
if you look at it on the screen, it should
Okay,
be
there you
legible.
go.
And then Gordon, as I go down talking about table 1, table 2, if you could just keep moving it down. But so as a starting point, let me, as a sort of an apology, I guess, to all of you, let me say that we were the other day looking at Senator Brock and Tom Eveslin making a presentation to some CUDs. And it was really interesting, really informative, and obviously a lot of work had gone into it. We've been listening to Stephen Whitaker for weeks and months, passionately advocating. We saw the Senator Leahy roundtable with Molly Gray and Peter and Senator Leahy and many others. We read the Matt Dunn document. We've seen the House legislation, the Senate legislation. We studied it all, and we said in-house, to some degree, our respected friends in the Senate and the House are in a position not so different to what we were when we had $135 million from RUS. So we said, what on earth must we do? How do we separate fact from fiction? How do we get good advice? So we said, let's simply give an opinionated view of what we would do based on what we've learned. If we were in your shoes, we're not, and we wouldn't be good at what you do, but if we were in your shoes, how on earth would we possibly tackle these problems? Hang on, I'm trying to get rid of this, shutting off my phone. I should have done it before. How would we do it? So we're going to say, here's what we would do in an unvarnished way. And again, forgive us for being we're not trying to be political, but we're only trying to help. And we'll try to separate where we're speaking in self-interest and we're speaking in non-self-interest. So if we turn to table 1, this is a list of all of the projects in Vermont that received DPS funding recently. And they're listed by fiber technology and by wireless technology. One point that we really feel strongly about is that every fiber project on this list says passive PON, passive optical network fiber. We feel very strongly that it's the wrong design. It's fundamentally a short-term 50-year-old technology design that was replaced about 10 or 15 years ago by Google building active fiber. The difference is that PON networks have to share a very small number of fibers going to little hubs, redistribute. They're typically offering 25 meg, 50 meg, 100 meg and the like. The active fiber, which gives its own fiber to Senator Cummings, if you were a customer, you'd have your own fiber coming from a central office just to your house. It's cheaper to put a gigabit on that. You don't worry about 100 up, 100 down. You'd start with a gigabit. If you wanted 100, we'd have to suppress the speed for you. If you wanted to get 10 gigabytes, we could do that easily. It costs almost nothing more. It costs a lot less to operate. The only reason why people are still building ponds, old-fashioned 50-year-old networks, is if you inherit an old complex sort of a grandmother or grandfather of a network, it's hard to retrofit it. If you're starting from fresh, then you should be building active fiber without question. We're looking now at 250 million to Vermont. I'm told that there's $100 billion in the federal pipeline. That should mean many more $250 influxes coming into Vermont. We really can do what Molly Grace said, which is let's make Vermont a model. But if you start with the concept that we need 100 up, 100 down instead of a gigabyte or 10 gigabytes down, plus whatever you want up, it's as easy as pie to make it whatever you want it to be, then we're simply not achieving the leadership that Molly was so persuasively advocating for. But if you look at these projects, we see that the average cost per home reached is, if you look at on the right-hand side, is about, from $6,000 down to about $2,500 or $2,000 per home reached with fiber. One of the strange characteristics of this project is because we have such a controversial reputation from our old RUS project where people say, well, gee, how do we know that you're really going to get to those homes you promised to get to? The DPS held us to a very high standard here, saying you have to prove every home you're going to get to. We built all this in record time by last December, but we've been out there proving it for months with DPS help, sending 1, 2, 3 people out, trucks out to every home. But the proving has been very productive for us. And the last 2 lines of table 1 help show why. We had projected that we were going to be able to reach with our BRS technology, 3,889 retail households, and we got funding for that. Thank you so much for it. $576 per home passed. The predictive network, and we'd spent $300,000 trying to perfect it last year. We really tried hard to make it right, but we made many mistakes in the 3889. Hundreds of houses had to be sort of retested, looked at really carefully. But one way to make the expensive software more effective is to go out and do a lot of field testing. Once we completed the field testing, we found, to our delight, it's really an important finding, that there's not 3,889 houses within that are on the DPS list of unserved, getting less than 25 megabits down. There's 6,260, almost double. In other words, the technology is really working well. We dropped down to a price, again, we're going through the testing. We're enjoying working with the DPS. They're being very, very constructive and very disciplined in following it all. But it looks like we're going to come in at around $350 per effective home reached. But what's impressive about that is that that's 1/20th what Tilson is charging. It's for example, it's 1/7 what EC Fiber is charging. It's 1/5 of the average. And so there's no doubt that broadband can be an effective augmented tool in terms of how to reach unserved homes. Fiber is the best. We love fiber. Fiber is the dream that we all have. Active fiber is what you need, is what there must be. Now's the chance to say, guys, if it's not active, it doesn't count. Can I go on to figure 2?
I am not hearing any questions, so yeah.
Madam Chair, actually,
Senator Hardy, I can't see anybody, so.
But
You have to holler.
Senator, can I make a suggestion too about questions? Because Ariana is with us. Ariana is who I learned the technology from. If I can try to give the sort of macro picture with all of its controversy, and then we're here to answer questions. Ariana can do a better job than I can on most of it. Gordon on much more, but I'm sort of here to make the wild opinions with apologies ahead of time.
Nope, that is your choice. If you want to take questions now or at the end, so.
But please interrupt me. Please interrupt me if you feel you must. But I think a good way would be to hurry through it and mention the highlights. And I hope enough of them will be of interest, or you'll say, "Gee, my questions are now different to what they would have been if we stopped along the way." Okay, so let's move on to Figure 2. So Figure 2 lists the FCC recommended speeds. In 1999, those were set when internet was newer at 200K up, 200K down. In 2010, in fact, after our RUS project went in, the recommended FCC speed became 4 down and 1 up. January 15, the FCC's 11th broadband report said, okay, we're changing 4 down and 1 up to 25 down, 3 up. That was 6 years ago. Tom Eveslin, in his comments with Senator Brock a few days ago, said we should be using 50 down and 5 up. And I can't say strongly enough, of course we should be using 50 down, 5 up. It'll take 2, 3, 4 years to build whatever this $100 billion is going to produce in the early stage in Vermont. And it'll take 7 and 10 years to finish it across the country, maybe longer. The worst thing is to say, oh, now I built it, but gosh, I'm 25 down and 3 up everywhere. And the new standard is 50 down and 5 up. So that it's an easy matter for this committee to recommend to the people that are sort of below you trying to implement, to say, guys, we're going to pick 50 down and 5 up just to get a couple of years ahead of the curve. It's a theoretical matter, but not bad to have as a goal alongside active fiber. Let me move then to figure 3. The DPS has done such careful work over the years. And again, the numbers are always changing a little bit, a few percent here and there, but basically the DPS more or less is saying there's 36,000 homes getting less than 10.1 in Vermont today. And there's 65,000 getting less than 25.3. And there's 254,000 getting less than 55. If we look at what our 108 towers could do if we put BRS on all of them, we'd be reaching 112,000 of the 254,000 homes that would be getting below 55 with more than 55. The interesting thing we're finding with our BRS frequencies, and again, everything is subject to test, but so please presume whatever I'm saying needs to be independently tested. You should hold us to independent testing. The DPS knows how to do independent testing. And again, and whatever you say about wireless, there's always 10 and 15% errors. In other words, whatever I say, give it a haircut. Say it isn't so in all cases. There's always a hill you didn't see, a tree you didn't see, and the like. But it's generally about 85% right. And so we're finding with BRS that either you get 50 meg or you don't service at all. So it starts at 50. It's not so hard to get 50. If you say, well, how many homes will you get it that are passing the 10 meg? The answer is 16,500 of those 36,000. But by the way, they're all getting 50 to 250 meg. How many homes of the 65,000? Well, the answer is 22,000, but they're all getting much higher speeds. So that it's more fun to use the number of how many homes are under 55 that need better service. And the answer is 254,000 of them. They all need better service with fiber. They'll all be got to with fiber. But if we can get to 112,000 of those with wireless, and we're only one of several providers. And whatever we spend, AT&T, Verizon, the other proud giant companies then increase their spending to match. It should mean that a lot of Vermonters will be getting a lot faster speed very quickly. Let me move to figure 4. And this is really the most exciting part of the whole table. A key goal that Senator Brock and Tom Eveslin focused on is not so much how do I get to those last 5,000 homes, or 15,000 homes, or 18 or 20, or whatever it might be. It was, how do we also close the digital divide? Tom Eveslin and Senator Brock said there's something like 50,000 homes in Vermont who need help either finding the right broadband service, or making better use of broadband, or understanding what the alternatives are, or getting to a better price point, or simply making better use of broadband, who a broadband core for 2 years could really help. 50,000 of those homes or something of that kind. So how do we all work together to not only reach the unserved, but also close the digital divide? The answer to that is involved, it is reachable, is visible by a couple of facts. If you look at the COVID-19 response recovery plan report that Matt Dunn and others worked on, you can see that low-income families buy a little bit differently to other families. but about 58% of them are buying internet at $41 to $80 a month. By the way, if you look at what CUDs are being told is achievable, $105, $110 a month. If you look at what EC Fiber is listing, revenue $105, $110 a month, it's not what those low income families are in need of. But nonetheless, thinking 40 to 80, which is 58% of the lower income families, is an important detail. Let's look at one other really important detail in that excellent report. 91% of all the thousands of Vermonters who responded to questionnaires that the report sent out, 91% are taking internet at home. Of those 91%, or of those 100 people where 91 said, I'm taking internet at home, 83 of that 100 said, I also have internet on my cell phone. It's impossible to implement the House bill leaning in favor of saying, hey, we just like fiber. You can't do that, given that 83% of people are not really separating fiber and at-home internet. The two have to be looked at together. But let me take you to a really exciting next line. It's my favorite line in this whole table. You see where it says low-income Rutland VTEL BRS families use of internet gigabytes per month. So we put out, as some of you know, we put out last March in the early days of COVID, a BRS tower in downtown Rutland in cooperation with the Rutland School Board. And the Rutland School Board were very helpful folks where they said, look, we've got families who are so demonstrably low income that they can't afford internet. Kids are going home, but they have no internet at home. They just simply can't afford it. We put it up there and said, okay, let's put the fastest internet in Vermont out in Rutland, and let's just leave it there only serving those families. We've had a year serving those families. The result is really exciting. Every month we've seen those families are increasing their gigabytes of usage. They're getting much better at it. They've learned a lot about it. Our average across the state is 170 gigabytes per month. The average amongst those low-income families is gradually moving upward. It'll probably be at the same 170 within 2 or 3 months. In other words, the digital divide, at least theoretically, with this small example of 125 people, by giving those families high-speed internet working well in a reliable way at low cost, the digital divide seems to have been erased. It's a big deal to me if we could do this statewide so that there isn't a difference in usage, in speed, in download capabilities amongst low income and high income. We would have achieved an awful lot, and it's within reach. Let me move then to our recommendations so that our average revenue for our GigE using our active fiber in our 14 towns is $43. Again, I look with amazement at the CUD saying, I'm going to get 100 for that, 110. We don't think it's possible. I look at, and I'm going to be really controversial here, I look at EC Fiber with their 50 million in debt for 6,000 customers. If we were them, we'd have 150 million in debt. If I had 150 million in debt, I'd go drown myself in the river and say, when the creditors come because I've gone bankrupt, I hope they'll say that I'd lost my mind. It's an impossible number. And for our CUDs to hold that as a model to say, oh, you can get 110 and you can take on $10,000 per home in debt is insanity. It just is the wrong model. We need to encourage the CUDs to be real, to be realistic, to look at what really can be done and to set up models with competition, with technology, with lots of the best thoughts we can to help them achieve what will be a long-lasting plan. So then let me move on to the next slide. VTEL average uploads and downloads. As Ariana said, we're seeing most people when they have unlimited up and down, pick about 88% down, 12 up. 100 up, 100 down is just a nonsense figure. If you had 200 to spare, you'd say, make it 180 down and 20 up. But 100 is just technology gobbledygook. Active optical fiber, you've heard me say, the model that we believe in is called the gigification of America. It's been out there for 10 or 15 years. We can really do it in Vermont. Who did we offer active fiber cost and design guidance to? All the CUDs. But let me now turn to talking about why you have to think of fiber and wireless together. How many wireless customers are there in the world? Well, I know 8.3 billion. there's more wireless customers than there are human beings on this earth, meaning many have 2 and 3 accounts. But you can't overlook a technology that has 8.3 billion. It's one of the most material technologies on earth. So we're doing roaming. We're Vermont's primary rural roamer. There's no one else offering it. There's few people in the country offering VoLTE roaming, but we're doing it for AT&T, for T-Mobile and Sprint. We've offered it to all CUDs. How many roaming connections do we make per month? You're going to be really surprised. 30 million. That's something like 1,000 a minute. In the time I've been talking, 20,000 Vermonters have somehow made some connection that's better because we're there doing roaming than would have been possible before we were there. And Senator Brock or Senator Cummings or Senator Brock was saying, no, Senator McDonald was saying, hey, but you can't be a small company. Well, in fact, we are, because the giants are doing thousands of times this size. Our total revenues are less than $30 million. There's 1,200 small rural phone companies in the US, and we're in the larger few hundred of those, but we're not a large company. But so now let me say what I would do if I had your $250 million. And I've run through this with Ariana, with Gordon, so I think I'm speaking on behalf of all of us. If the first 250 million, putting 77.5% into CUDs and local incumbents makes good sense. But if we were to do that and use active fiber, it's really important to give the CUDs clear guidance of what they must accomplish, because if they're replicating a model that can't work, $110 per month, massive debt, it just will only lead to a huge catastrophe. But it's a great idea to help them reach those last few thousand homes and to use it with active fiber. It can be done. And the nice thing that active fiber can do for CUDs, which is really material, is that all the fibers then come back to a single point. If you commingle passive fiber with CUDs reaching last homes, you can't untangle the CUDs customers from the local phone company affiliates customers. It's sort of like Siamese twins that are hooked at the head, at the shoulder, at the hips, and at the end of the heels. If you want to enable CUDs to be the independent enterprise that they want to be, you need to use active fiber and help those active fibers come to single meet points. Google is joining an effort like that in a city right now in the US, where they're saying, okay, you built the fiber, we'll connect to it. We would say to any CUD, you built the fiber, we'll connect to it, or let Consolidate, or let anybody, but let them be independent, let them be responsible, let them control their own technology destiny by active fiber. Okay, next, I would like to see.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator
Yep.
McDonald.
I'm trying my best to keep up, and if I had to take a pop quiz and explain what the difference is between active fiber and what layman's view of fiber is, I couldn't pass it. I couldn't pass that pop quiz. And I don't, until I can do that, I don't know about the rest of the members of the committee.
Okay,
It makes it very difficult to
Right, I think-
comprehend what the witness is seeking to impart to us.
Okay, I think he's got about 3 more lines, and then we were going to go to Ms. Robinson to explain that technology.
Second part, and I said that I would identify when we're talking about our own self-interest. Everything we've said so far is only to give you our honest to God bottom line. Here's what we would do if we were you. Now I'm talking about self-interest. I think that we should take 12.5% of the 250 and give it to VTEL Wireless to put BRS radios on all 108 towers that would reach most of these homes. It could, if we could do it starting tomorrow, it could probably all be done this year. Again, everything takes longer than you thought. Winter becomes a nightmare, all those kinds of things. It's harder and harder to get pieces and parts, but we could put it up vastly faster, and we could start solving the problem vastly sooner, and it would let the broadband core get to work and start solving problems where they're needed right now. I would then take another 5% that's needed for state board management, and another 5% for the broadband core. So those are our ideas of what we would do if we were, if we had the horrendous responsibility with $100 billion pouring into America and with many more 250 millions coming to Vermont. If we were in your position, we wish you only the best. We're here to help every way we can. And now, Ariana, can you begin with the question of what is active fiber anyway?
Absolutely. So it's actually, once you go through the explanation, it's complicated terms, but simple concept.
I think we can take the
So
screen down now and then it'd be easier if we could see you. Can we do that? There we
There
go.
we go.
Okay.
Okay. So an active fiber system is a system that's designed with dedicated fiber to each subscriber, each location. So in the case of VTEL's own deployment of active fiber several years ago, we actually allocated approximately 1.5 fibers for each customer. So essentially in that way, we're building in growth into neighborhoods, knowing that we have extra fibers there where we could directly connect to somebody. So when you're done building an active fiber system, you connect a customer, they have a fiber that runs from their home all the way back with nobody else using that fiber strand to wherever the connecting point is. In our case, that is our central offices. In the case of a COD, it would be some sort of facility where electronics or a cross-connect panel would be located. It's very easy to segment services for one customer versus another because they are physically separate. Management becomes easier that way. You have one subscriber down, you have one issue, one person impacted. You don't have to take down an entire set of people. Conversely, passive optical network uses a series of specialized equipment to split that signal. So you have in most cases, a single fiber leaving the office, the serving office, running out to a passive splitter. So this is a piece of equipment that essentially is taking that signal and dividing it multiple times. And then those individual splits are serving customers. And you'll see 16 or 32 or 64 way splits commonly in the field. If you have a problem with the equipment in the office with that port, you're affecting all of those customers. If you have a problem with that one fiber before that splitter, you're affecting all of those customers. Additionally, just from a support perspective, it's much harder to do traces on fiber. It's much harder to say, oh, I need to now give this one customer who wants to be upgraded to, their business is taken off and they are the next Facebook. I need to give them, 100 gigabits per second to that home. I have to somehow find a way to separate them from that passive optical network. Versus an active, you change the equipment on either side, the equipment at the customer's end, the equipment at the serving end, and suddenly you've upgraded their service.
Arietta, what's the difference in cost to put it in and in cost to run it?
Absolutely. So the main places where an active system will cost more, and it's not significant. We often see 10 or 15%, sometimes 20%, depending on how the network is laid out. The cost is higher in the fiber itself. So the fiber counts you're putting out, the cables are larger. So in VTEL's case, we have a number of cables leaving our offices, 864 strands. Some of our smallest fiber cables we deployed were 48 or 96 strands. In a passive system, you may be deploying a 288 strand instead of that 864. So it's a cost increase for the amount of fibers. Typically, those are measured in pennies per foot, so it's not a significant amount. The installation of that cable is higher. You have more fibers to splice. So that's where they are stringing the cable out, let's say on the pole line. That fiber ends, they grab another reel and they continue. You now have to connect those two together. So instead of doing, let's say 144 splices to put 204 cables together, you may be doing 864 splices. This does increase the cost. Troubleshooting. Management continuing to work with it ongoing, it actually reduces troubleshooting times. It's a lot simpler for the people to work with in the field. It doesn't require specialized equipment. A lot of the passive optical networks are using, very specially designed equipment for telco use for these networks versus an active system uses, the same technology you would find in a campus environment, in a data center, in our homes where, you know, an Ethernet switch essentially is serving those connections. So the costs there are actually lower on an active system typically than on a passive optical network system.
Ariane, is it fair to say that some companies, maybe even most companies that are building active fiber, then say, well, now I can let go some of my field force because maintenance costs are much lower, and our costs, in our case, thankfully we didn't have to, because we then use this vast capacity to put massive TV on it. And so we needed as many people to go out there maintaining the TV services, maintaining the extra complexity that we added on that helped us survive against Comcast. Without it, we probably couldn't have survived. And so for us, there wasn't as much savings as there are to some people. But one of the fun examples of where it costs us less is that when somebody says, I want 1 billion bit per second, we say, fine, here it is, $35, thank you, plus $5 for a box. When someone says, I want 100 meg, we say, oh my God, I hate this. I have to spend another $50 to reduce your capacity. Oh my God, I just hate this. I have to suppress your demand. And so when I look at many of the CUD's business plans that say 50 meg for $40 and 100 meg for $80 and 800 for $110, et cetera, say, oh my God, it's because they're caught in this nightmare of 50-year-old passive fiber. Make it active and give everybody gig E. It's just simply cheaper. Internet, when you buy it wholesale, is very, 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 very cheap. And it's only going to get massively cheaper. Giving everyone gig E simply gives them unlimited speed and a feeling of richness that is a really good competitive advantage when you're going up against Comcast, that says to many of our customers, you don't need gig E, you're happy, be happy with 100 meg, be happy with us. And people say, I just like 1 billion bits per second. I don't know that I need it, but I like it. More that's free is nice.
I would say that is accurate, Michelle, to go back to the beginning of your point, but I think you might have filled in there everything.
Other questions? Senator Bray.
The Gigi service, is it symmetrical?
Our service is deployed that way in our fiber footprint, not out of need, really. When we look at our bandwidth usage and what customers are actually consuming, upstream is almost nothing compared to the downstream usage. More, we've deployed it that way because it's simple. As Michelle mentioned, we don't have to put a lot of processing power into our routers and switches and things to actually monitor and rate limit traffic, because it doesn't exceed a level that would concern us. So from a network management standpoint, it's really nice to be able to set and forget for the most part. From an actual usage and need standpoint, we don't see people needing upstream speed.
Senator Bray, something that we all tend to forget is that the internet was partly invented here in Vermont. The earliest version of the old ARPA network was partly supported by the University of Vermont right here. Some of the early visionaries who saw the internet, one of them is the famous Bob Metcalf. Bob Metcalf is the person that for 10 years have been using the word the gigification of America. It's fun to think of great leaders who founded this technology like Bob Metcalf, who were here when Vermont was a leader, talking about let's gigify Vermont. And it's meaningful to people like that Vermont University of Vermont leadership returned. It just simply isn't hard to do. Gigabit is cheaper, faster, more fun, and it really is future-proof. When Peter Welch in his talk to Senator Leahy talked about I'm future-proofing it, and I wrote, we're friends, we're neighbors, I wrote him a note saying, Peter, for God's sakes, talk about octave fiber. I got a reply a second later saying TKS, meaning thanks. And I thought that means he didn't have time to read it. So I think I probably had no impact on Peter. I don't really know how to make the point, except that we really believe strongly it's absolutely true. And if you folks could take the lead in doing it, that a lot of others around Vermont and then around America would begin to say, Google is right. The Bob Metcalf's the world is right. The gigification of America is what we want to do. Active fiber has to be the design. It costs a little more to build and a lot less to run.
And one follow-up question is, what's the largest jurisdiction that's currently running on active fiber?
Oh gosh, I'm going to say Kansas City probably is one with Google. Austin, Texas, probably with Google. There's a map I've seen that Steve Whitaker circulated a while ago of all the Google cities. They're still building some, although they've cut back. I think there's about 12 cities or so. I mean, there's just no doubt that there's hundreds of thousands of Americans being served by active fiber, and we're doing it, but we simply copied it from them. And in fact, we can. I will send you the Google map if that would be helpful, and then you could see from there how to follow up.
Sure, that'd be great. So one thing we've talked about is durability and interoperability. So say we came away from this meeting loving the idea of GigE. What happens to the rest of the current infrastructure in the state of Vermont? Can a GigE system talk to the passive fiber network and vice versa?
It's a really good question. Ariana?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things at play here. I guess if you distill it all down, the answer is yes. We're talking about networks for broadband data here. We're talking about networks that are supporting Ethernet technology, at their core as the primary, what we're moving around. In terms of handoffs, obviously, if you're moving from one company to another, those are, negotiated connections, and they sort out the technical aspects. In terms of use case, if you're trying to make a network available for another carrier, or another business, or anyone, having a network, a fiber network built such that you're sharing fibers between multiple customers makes it much more complicated. And this would be, in a PON system. If you have a network that is, and I hate to use this term, but rich, where you have fiber for everyone there, it becomes a much simpler prospect to find ways to do those handoffs, because if you have one technology serving a customer on this side of the street, theoretically you could have a different technology serving the customer across the street. The fiber doesn't care as long as it's not being used for other purposes at the same time. And that's another of the benefits of active versus passive, is you have that flexibility to say, you know what, I don't care what somebody's coming to me with, saying they want to connect to this person or they want to get data to this person. I can put anything on this that will work on fiber. I don't have to worry about how to get it into a format or how to keep that data separate for this customer versus this one going over this fiber, last mile. I can dedicate that, and I don't need to worry about it. I can do something different over here that works for, person XYZ, company XYZ.
So Ariana, can I ask another version of Senator Bray's question to try to get an answer I don't know the answer to?
Please.
If, let's say, Consolidated were across the table talking to Senator Bray, and he were to say, I want you to look at using capital we have available to begin to migrate from passive to active. How big a nightmare is it for them, or a problem? Can it be done gradually? One of the reasons, Senator Bray, why passive isn't going away is that British Telecom began building it in 50 years ago. Deutsche Telekom began building it 50 years ago. Pac Bell, before the phone companies had new names, began building it. So I think it's not so easy to retrofit, but if there's a massive infrastructure problem, you can retrofit anything. But Ariane, if you had that problem and you're Consolidated, how huge a problem is it for you?
To put that on a more micro level, before VTEL, we did our US project and built active fiber. We deployed a couple of neighborhoods with passive optical network, which is where we got to learn about it and explore it. The retrofit really depends on how that design was done for the passive optical network. In our case, we were able to replace the fiber trunks feeding those passive splitters from the point of those splitters to the customer, the fiber was dedicated. So for us, it wasn't a rebuild to every customer. It was a rebuild the trunk line from that splitter back to our office, which is a much more focused goal. But again, if you take that, for VTEL, 3 neighborhoods that we were working with, and extrapolate that to a much larger company and many more locations, it depends. What are the pole conditions? Did we bury that fiber? Was it aerial?
And I see Senator Brock has a question, but I just want to add one more thing, Senator Bray. So I'm going on at too much speed. But if Consolidated came to you and said, gee, I don't know if I want to, if you said, I'm sorry, but you have to, you'd be being their very best friend, because the guy building the wrong thing is going to be bypassed. He's going to be dead. He's going to be obsolete. He's working on a system that was built to compete with coaxial cable 50 years ago. When faster wireless comes in everywhere, the guy with a active fiber system can probably win. The guy with a passive fiber system probably is made obsolete. Anyway, but I'm sorry, I interrupted. I saw Senator Brock with a question.
I've got Senator Brock, I've got Senator Hardy, and I've got Senator McDonald.
Okay, I'm done talking. So the rest, I'm sorry, I talked too much. But
And I think we're going to cancel our next, unless we don't have a witness coming in. Is that right, Senator Hardy? This was your presentation for the appointment?
That's right. And I can do it in 30 seconds.
Okay, I think maybe because we have got a witness coming in at 4, and I would like to give you a few minute break. We may put you to the end. Okay, Senator Brock.
Well, last count, I have 181 questions, but I will try to limit that. Get time.
You can have 2, Senator.
Thank you. With that said, you have a number of partnerships that you list of folks that you're providing wireless roaming as a partner. Have you had discussions about this and about your concept with any of the CUDs? And is there any interest in relationships to do some of the things that you want currently?
So I will try to answer that. Then Gordon, please add in. Yes, we've spoken to all the CUDs. The problem is that they are in the position that we were in 10 years ago, where they're not quite sure what to do. But what we've said to them is, if you want to, we're a key opportunity for us is to resell BRS to T-Mobile as we do that, because T-Mobile is using nationally the same frequencies that we're using, except we own those frequencies in Vermont. So they're well positioned to take advantage of us, especially for BRS. But as we migrate more of our customers to BRS, we free much more for AT&T and for T-Mobile by taking bandwidth hogs off the 700 and off the EWS. So that's good for all the other roaming partners and might even bring Verizon onto our network. I'm not saying it will. Each of these companies is proud, is tremendously talented. They hate it when anybody pretends to talk for them. I speak for nobody but us, but we're proud to be serving them. We don't have Verizon. We've been talking to them for a long time. Creating more space on our 700 and our AWS might even cause us to be becoming a neutral host to all of them. We've said to the CUDs, if you would like to participate in our roaming contracts that are really hard to achieve, or to resell our services, we would love for you to do it. We'd do it on the same basis that we're offering services to AT&T, to Verizon, to anybody else. If you wanted to build smaller radio facilities in smaller communities around the state, we have 50, 100, and 200 different sites located where you could put those facilities. If they wanted to have a small tower reaching 10 homes or 6 homes or 12 homes or whatever. If that was useful for roaming and they were using our technology, we could include that in the roaming relationships we're offering to others, which could be a way for them to make money. We could let them sell independently our broadband services, charging them the same that, for example, we'd be charging T-Mobile, letting them decide how they want to sell it, whether they want to put their own antennas, whether they want to use us for customer service or whatever. There's many ways where when we have a long-term, stable, really effective network where we can partner with others who are trying to get to those last mile homes. But the details of what the technology looks like, what the fiber looks like, what the radios look like, all are complicated. They all take more than an intent to work together. And we haven't got beyond the general intent to work together, although we've tried. We found with a couple of companies, yes, they're very eager. With some, they say, no, we'll never work with private. There's a whole, each CUD is its own personality. But what we found is that mostly they're all run by really well-intentioned people without a huge amount of business, some not, but without a huge amount of business experience. And I look at them as a group and think, oh my gosh, I would just hate to see this not work out well. And we'd love to help it work out well, but how that will work in terms of fiber and in terms of wireless and in terms of roaming and in terms of resale of super high-speed services and how this can be step one towards their getting fiber to those homes, I just don't know. That's beyond what the details that are available to us to be able to predict, sir.
Well, the biggest digital divide that I've seen in the discussions here is the divide between those who want a fiber to the premise solution to the exclusion of anything else, who argue that doing anything else would detract from getting that final quote, perfect, unquote, solution. On the other hand, there are others who say, well, we need to have a solution now to deal with the thousands of people who don't have access now. Now, I see in your proposal, you have a breakdown with about 75% going to fiber to the premise, about, it looks like 12.5% in allocation to fixed BRS, fixed wireless BRS. Now, would you envision that fixed wireless be something that would ultimately be converted to fiber to the premises over time? Or would you consider these things to be separate and have multiple technologies? So that's one part of my question. The other part of my question is for fixed wireless, who should be in charge of getting the fixed wireless out? Of getting the fiber to the premises out? Should that be individual CUDs? Should that be, for example, the public utilities, the Green Mountain Powers of the world? Because that asks the question that when a tree falls in the forest, not only who will hear it, but who will come out and repair what it knocks down? Does it make sense to have multiple trucks from multiple providers go out to fix the same broken wire? And how complicated is that? I know that's kind of a long and involved question, but since I had two questions, I had to get some of my 181
In two questions.
Wow. Okay. So those are all the key questions, and they're really, really complicated. And I'll try to answer. A reason why GMP should not be putting out those fibers, or why Washington Electric shouldn't be going to RUS to get those, borrow the money to build those fibers, is twofold. One is that if you're really just trying to reach those ends of the road homes, there aren't that many homes. The business model is very difficult to make work. There is no $110 a month. There is no massive number of people chasing the truck saying, I want it. So that if Washington Electric were to persuade RUS to lend them the money to do that, I don't think RUS would. I think it's baloney. I think RUS would say, guarantee that with your electric rates. And if they're willing to do that, that's one thing. Of course, electric rates could pay for fiber, but assuming that they can't, there may not be enough demand and revenue out there to pay for those. So that I kind of think that if you distribute who's got bottom line financial accountability, you're creating a sort of a massive EC fiber mess forever, where nobody's ever accountable for that $50 million of debt. No one's ever accountable for bringing in the revenues to pay for the costs. And I think that ultimately leads to catastrophe, part one. Part two, if people take my BRS tomorrow, then are they going to take the CUDs GigE to homes the day after? I really think the answer is yes. Why I think it's yes is that we felt for a long time in something we call thick root, thin root. We think that every home should have fiber to it. We think that every home should have mobility. But Vermonters think that because the Matt Dunn report shows that 91% of respondents say, I'm using internet at home, and 83% say I'm also using also using mobile wireless. I really think that one supports the other. The two can't be separated. They're immensely integrated, thick root, thin root. So that I think that getting the problem solved with the people that have demand today that aren't using the service, like those 200 homes or 125 homes in Rutland, I'm really proud that we did that. And you could be proud to do that for, I mean, you would be proud. We would all be proud to see that happen for 50,000 homes that are all getting better service today, tomorrow. And then they're becoming more informed users of the internet. And then they go on from there to taking fiber. But the trap to fall into and to avoid falling into is that there aren't that many homes out there that are unserved. And unless you're permitting the CUDs to actually take customers away from Comcast, and that's not easy to do. Comcast fights back very hard. But unless you're permitting that to happen, you've got the CUDs only really with a very small number of homes. And it just isn't that easy. I'll give you one strange anecdote just because it's so baffling. So that we were, there's a couple of towns, Gordon, remind me what the name of the towns are down in the southeast, Whitingham and what are the two towns?
You may be thinking of Wardsboro,
and Whitingham, right?
Halifax, Whitingham, Wardsboro.
Yeah.
The ones that
Okay.
you discussed recently.
So we were asked for years, when will your tower go up there? When will your tower go up there? And the head of the Board of Selectmen was calling me saying, gee, why the delay? Why the delay? There's so much demand. We ended up putting it up, sending out cards to 4,000 homes saying internet service is here, and 3 called us up to say, we'll take the service. It's not, we've got 150 or so there. It's not that it's a bad tower. We like it. We're happy. It's doing roaming revenue as well. I'm simply saying that the idea that the people are going to chase your trucks just isn't true. You need that broadband core to knock on that person's door and say, we've got Lions Club volunteers going and knocking on doors now saying, gee, Mr. Smith, look at the service you'll be getting here. Look at the speed. Here's how internet can save you money. Here's how it will put you in better contract with your grandchildren. It can all be done, but it's a long, slow process. And the idea that the CUDs are going to fall into a rich business that's just waiting for them, or are going to compete with Comcast successfully, it's much more difficult than that. And if it doesn't work, it would be catastrophic to take this vast opportunity and see it result in just a whole bunch of bankruptcies. Have I answered your question, Senator? Part of it?
Well, with another hour, you might be able to fill the blank for me. Thank you very much for what you've done.
Unfortunately, we don't have an hour. So unless this is a point of clarity, I want to give you like a 10-minute break because this has given me a lot to think about. I think I need time to clear my head before I get to electric charging stations. So Senator McDonald.
Madam Chair, in listening to this presentation, speaking for myself, I have to overcome my own prejudices. And I have found the presentation fascinating. And Madam Chair, we are not planners, but we're playing them on Zoom.
Mhm.
And
Poorly, I might add.
No, but we're not built for this. And it's not our job. And we are being thrown into a breach that we were here when we're because no one else has been. I still couldn't take a spot quiz on this, but we have to do 2 things in the next 6 months or whatever. One is to start building out in a way that puts money to good use, and not building out in a way that cuts our knees off should we more fully appreciate the information we're receiving today and have it vetted by people smarter and more technical than us. And I'm open to that, and I don't know how we craft that the next step that doesn't go down the wrong road and then we go repeat the same problem that we've been into for the last 15 or 20 years. So that's our challenge. And I don't know how I thought both Senator Brock and his questions yesterday and Senator Bray, who put them down on paper, outline both our challenge here. So to the witness, I sometimes say things I shouldn't, but you certainly seem to have taken a public speaking
I would say
course.
you have no idea what a huge step this just
Well,
was.
a public speaking course and have approached this in a more welcoming fashion than some of us have become accustomed to. So thank you.
Okay. Committee, I'm
And Senator, can I suggest one brief thing? If any of you wants any of us to come and sit down with you we've all had, I've had about 2 COVID shots. I'm not contagious. I wear a mask. If any of you say, if Senator Sirotkin, if Senator Cummings, anyone says, I want an hour to pepper you with questions, we'll drive to where you are. We'll bring the coffee. We're here to help. Our goal is exactly yours, to make Vermont the model that Molly said she wanted to be.
okay. I thank you for that. And I've got Senator Bray.
Well, I'll be super short because I know where it's time to stop. I feel like we've been living in the Betamax world, and Shulman just showed up with VHS, and that's a little tricky. So
Yeah, I think we've got a lot to learn. I am, if Faith can drop a note to Senator Perchlik, who is our next witness, going to give you a break till 10 after 4. And then once we finish charging stations and fees, we can just have some time to noodle this back and forth. I think it's given us a lot to think about. And I'll see if we can find some other folks to help us think through the technicalities of this too. So take a deep breath, get some air. I'm going to go out and see what the chainsaw is removing in my neighborhood. And I'll see you at 10 after 4. Faith, does that work? Now that
I
I've
just
announced it,
sent a note to Senator Perchlik.
probably working. Okay, good. Thank you. 10
Thank you,
after.
everybody.
Thank you, Mr.
Stopping live
Goudet
stream
and
now.
Matthews